for Aries rising and or moon sign for October 2023. So Aries, your ruler Mars is about to move signs, as is your seventh house ruler Venus from the very beginning of October. So there's a lot of things changing by the beginning of October, the first week. That is when Mars moves into Libra and then conjoins the south node of the moon, Ketu, in Libra, as Venus, the ruler of Libra, moves from Cancer to Leo, your fourth to your fifth. So everything is shifting around, Aries, for everybody, for all the signs, first week of October. But how you're going to experience it more so is in personal relationships, at home, with your partner themselves, perhaps experiencing this more so. You might be mindful, I would say, the first week of October, of having sort of an issue with your partner, and perhaps, thinking about this as a good time to maybe clear the air to deal with some issue that's come up, some past issue, perhaps some issue that your partner has been dealing with for the last year and a half, actually, with the south node Ketu moving through your seventh house. So finding a balance between all of these things, your own needs and concerns, which is what Mars is all about, versus Venus and your need to now compromise. And there are some things to compromise and to negotiate with here. And there's some tricky dynamics for sure that are coming up here the first week of the month. There are also some strengths, many strengths going on, and that includes Mercury, which is moving through your sixth house sign Virgo in exaltation in its own sign Virgo. So it's not just that it's exalted in Virgo, Mercury is at home in Virgo. So it basically means that the sixth house in your chart is really turned on right now as the sun also moves through this section of your life for the first couple of weeks. So basically, it's a good time for getting everything in order, even though, again, you're dealing with lots of relationship issues and all of that, or your partner themselves is dealing with something. It's a great time to get very organized, get orderly, get everything in the schedule, and really, I guess, manage your life really effectively with Mercury exalted and at home. So essentially, you can really put all of those big ideas, ideals into practical means. So it's like, put it in your diary, put it in your calendar, get focused on it, get going, do something. The energies of the month of October, though they're very scattered and a lot of changes are happening, and that's also especially due to the eclipses, which I'll go through now. I think there's a lot of efficiency that's also possible, even with the changes that are happening. So in other words, you really sort of have to think on your feet in October, Aries, and to do something. So let me just show you the eclipses. The first eclipse we have is on the 14th. It's a new moon. It's a new moon in your sixth house sign where Mercury is. So it's very powerful. So it's a very powerful time for change and changing up your daily routine, I would say, Aries. Maybe doing something differently, approaching your life, your work, especially your health routines, any health issues in a different way, and planning things. And again, because of Mars having moved now and Venus both having moved, there's some things to work out and negotiate. Because if you're trying to perfect yourself in your daily life, you have to consider other people as you do that, because obviously your life routines affect your partner or any other. So you might have to deal with your partner's issue or some issue with your partner while you're also trying to do whatever you need to do. So there's a few things to work out here, Aries, but you can absolutely work these things out. So that's the new moon. It's a new beginning in many ways in terms of your work life and health routines. Maybe there's some new health regime you can implement at this stage from the new moon and eclipse. Now, of course, the fact is that it is an eclipse. So you're going to have to stay open to the potential for, things not being very clear from the get-go. And as soon as we have this new moon and eclipse, it opens up a 2-week period of uncertainty and not a lot of clarity, essentially. And it's always best to kind of just maybe hold back on making any major plans, I would say. Obviously respond to what's happening in the more immediate time frame and do what you need to do, but maybe not make any major plans that are going to impact your life in a long-term way, until at least after all of these things can be resolved by the next major lunation, and that's 2 weeks later on the 28th, where you have an eclipse moon in your sign. So this is a lunar eclipse in your sign, your fourth lord, the home, happiness, all of that, personal life issues are coming to a head in a way by the end of October. October 28th is the eclipse. And this is when I think you can, again, reach maybe some resolution around these things, but also that also implies that there's some sort of culmination point and exaggeration, and the mind can become really distorted in a way with the moon conjoined Rahu in your sign. In a way, this is sort of the culmination of not just the eclipse in October, but actually the last year and a half of the eclipses and everything that's been shaken up in your life in a very personal way, and especially in your relationships. So be patient, I would say, Aries, especially around this lunar eclipse on the 28th of October. And as this sort of pans out and plays out in whatever way it must, then you can make decisions and move forward, I would say, after this. So even if you feel like you need to make a decision, because it might feel like that, everything feels more urgent around eclipses, perhaps just hold back. It might not be as urgent as you think it is, or as you feel it is, more especially. So October is definitely a time of change, and in your relationships, you're going to feel it, and it's going to impact your day-to-day life. Aries, I think that it's time to really make those changes and to use these eclipses to overcome some block that you've been dealing with, either with your relationship or with relating in general. And to be able to see something differently, to be able to open your mind to new ways of approaching life, not just your partner, but just approaching life in general. And if you can do that, then I think you're making the most of these transits in October. As always, Aries, I wish you the very best for the month ahead. And until next time. For Taurus rising and or moon sign for October 2023. So Taurus, Venus, your ruler, is just about to finish up its whole retrograde and shadow phase period, where once it moves past 4 degrees of Sidereal Leo, it will leave its shadow. In other words, it will pass the point at which it began to move backwards in July. So really July, August, September, October, this whole period, there's been some issue that you've been dealing with, Taurus, around the home life. And there's some issue that's been on hold in that, for that reason. So that means that's good news, because it means that things can start to move forward now. You can start to plan ahead as it clears that point after the first week of October. At the same time, Mars, your seventh lord, which is all about the other, a partner or any other, is moving into your sixth whole sign, conjoined Ketu, the south node. If I show you that here in the first few days of the month, by the 5th of October, they come together by exact degree, Mars, Ketu in your sixth sign. As the ruler of your sixth, Venus, again, clears this point and moves forward. So there's definitely a sense of things moving forward in home life and in some obstacle that you've been dealing with, because that's certainly what Mars and Ketu conjoined in your sixth house can be all about. It's like overcoming some challenge or some issue or some conflict. Either, again, it could be to do with the home, because Venus is in your fourth house while this is happening, but it could be anything really. It could be any kind of inner conflict you're dealing with, or any conflict around the home, or with somebody at home, or with somebody at work as well, because sixth house is very much about co-workers and all of that. Also employees, if you employ people. But there's definitely some sense of things moving forward and clearing this block now, because both Mars and Ketu are well placed in the sixth house to overcome some issue. And ultimately, you might say sixth house is all about our own inner demons anyway, Taurus. So there's something that you've been dealing with that once you deal with it, you can overcome it. At the same time, we have the sun continuing to move through your fifth, with Mercury also in your fifth. This is where the new moon is by the 14th, and that's an eclipse. So there's a lot of things changing in your fifth house. And the fifth house is also around your children. So home life and children are a couple of things. But even if you don't have children, it could be that you're dealing with some plans. You're perhaps planning something, you're likely going to plan something and schedule something at this point or after this point. But I would just say that because it's an eclipse, just be open-minded about how all of this is going to pan out, either for your children or whatever's going on with them, or for any plans that you're making at this time. So let me show you that actually the eclipse, and that's on the 14th. in your fifth house sign, with Mercury very powerful during this whole period. So it's a great time for planning, actually. And like I said, it's a great time for overcoming something, whether it's a private thing, a home issue, or whatever, and moving on in that respect, and implementing that in your daily routine as well. That's the other thing. There's something you're overcoming, but that means having to kind of schedule it, it's a nice idea to have, to want to do something or to overcome something, but in order for you to do that, you actually have to like schedule it and do it, actually. So that's the eclipse on the 14th, which doesn't really reach a full resolution until the 28th. So 2 weeks after that, we have an eclipse in your 12th sign. So this is where Jupiter is also, which, is the planet that guides us, especially around eclipses. And when there's any sort of sense of confusion, as is often the case around eclipses, at the same time, a sense of urgency to do something, but you're confused about what to do, Jupiter is always the one to look to. And because Jupiter is conjoined this full moon and partial lunar eclipse in your 12th sign, retrograde in your 12th sign, I think there's a need to sort of tune in, more so than trying to find answers from someone. Like getting advice at this time might not be the best. I would say, yeah, sure, listen to people's advice, but I would say more so tune into your own inner guidance, your own intuition around this full moon, especially on the 28th of October, and listen for that guidance, that inner guidance. And the guidance might be just that this, whatever it is, needs to be let go of. You need to end this thing. You might find a resolution around these issues so that you can move on. And again, whatever's been triggered in October 14th, and the eclipse and Mars in your sixth house at this time, whatever you can do to overcome the issue, it's around the 28th of October that all of these things can reach a sort of resolution. It also means, though, that it might reach a sort of culmination point, an intense point of focus. And because Mars is very much about doing something, sometimes you have to consider, maybe overdoing it and try not to act too impulsively at this stage on the 28th of October and the eclipse. I would say try to step back a bit from it, and again, quieten down and go within to kind of get some clarity within yourself. So a very complex month in a way, Taurus. But again, like I said, I do think that there's a lot to overcome here, and that you can overcome and move on finally, especially with Venus moving on now out of its shadow, and you can start to plan ahead. Okay, I hope that's been of help. As always, I wish you the very best for the month ahead, and until next time. For Gemini rising and or moon sign for October 2023, Gemini, your ruling planet Mercury is exalted in its own sign Virgo in your fourth whole sign, and this is a very powerful position and time of year for you. Now, unfortunately, it's only a brief transit. It's only until the 18th of October, from the very beginning of October, but it's definitely one to make the most of and to feel that strength and more deliberate sort of sense of direction and clarity in what you're doing, especially around home life and things that make you happy. Mercury in your fourth whole sign with the sun here also is a powerful time for just connecting with what makes you happy and who makes you happy. And the sun and Mercury, of course, means that Mercury's combust, but that happens so often that that's not a bad thing for you. It just means that it brings more clarity. And Mars is finishing up in your fourth whole sign, which could have been a sort of irritant in a way in some sort of home situation in your fourth house. Mars and the fourth house don't really go hand in hand, because it's a bit like a bull in a china shop. So you might have felt sort of like just tetchy or irritable in some instance or with someone at home. But now that Mars is moving into your fifth whole sign, and I'll show you that for the first few days, we see that shift going on. And by the 5th of October, it conjoins Ketu, the south node, which is finishing up in your fifth sign. So there's definitely some issue coming to a head here in terms of whether it's a creative pursuit or a plan that you want to put in place, something you'd like to do, or around your children. And so something's coming to a head, some block perhaps that you have to overcome here, and you will overcome. And I think that this could be a very powerful time for creative self-expression and planning and scheduling something and doing something, as Mercury is in your fourth sign, exalted. So a very powerful time. At the same time, Venus, which rules this part of your chart, so again, children or creativity or planning, whatever it is moving past the point at which it began to move retrograde back in July. So really, you've got many months now of having been dealing with some issue here, whether it's again planning or around children or planning for your children, that is starting to move forward now past the shadow phase. So it's moving forward in your third sign. So this is definitely a good time to plan ahead and to move ahead with things. There is obviously a lot of other things going on in the heavens right now with other planets, the slower moving planets on the other side of the zodiac, sort of showing bigger themes that are sort of stalled in a way in terms of more perhaps career issues and things like that, and more bigger questions, you might say, around, why you're doing any of this that you're doing. So it might all feel very busy in October, and especially with the eclipses, which I'll show you now, everything just feels a lot more urgent. And all that's great, but is it really urgent? Do you really have to do that? That's something I would question, because oftentimes eclipses just feel urgent, whether or not it actually is necessary to make a decision. At the same time, because there's so many powerful transits going on personally for you, I think it's a good time to sort of do something with it. It's just you don't want to overdo it, of course. And again, considering the bigger picture and the longer term plan, which in a way is, again, in a kind of holding pattern in many ways. So let me show you, first of all, the new moon, and it's a solar eclipse that is occurring in your fourth sign, in the home situation, with Mercury, your ruler, very powerful here. So despite the eclipse normally being sort of very impulsive and, sometimes very erratic and, not very clear because it's literally a shadow, it's an eclipse. The fact that Mercury is here exalted in your fourth sign, I think there can be like a very level-headed approach to this you can take and make a decision around this, whatever's cropped up for you now, and move forward with plans. Now, again, because it's an eclipse, it's always just best to maybe just be open-minded about plans and not be very definitive. So maybe not set it in stone right now, and allow for the eclipses to do their thing and to make the changes that they have to make before you get clear about how to move forward. A couple of weeks after this, we have the full moon. So it all kind of reach a culmination point by October 28th. This is a full moon in your 11th whole sign, in Aries, Mars' sign, which is opposite. So as Mars, Mercury, Sun, all these planets move into your fifth house sign, there's definitely something here to work out in terms of your social life and your plans, in terms of your friends and your children also. There's a balance to get right here for the full moon at the end of October. And also it's about a balance between your plans and other people's, and having to negotiate with other people, whether it's a group of people, either at work or people you associate with, or just generally, and to keep an open mind around this period as well, because the full moon in Aries eclipsed, again, it can feel very urgent, like you have to do something, but I would caution against maybe overdoing it and being impulsive and reckless even. So any kind of social engagements, I would say maybe take a back seat. Just watch it unfold, watch it how it all plans out. If you're working with any groups of people, likewise, and just allow all of these eclipse energies to settle down after the end of October so that you can move forward with your plans again. Other than that, October is a powerful time for you, I think, in many ways, and things can become very clear eventually. It's just there's this shakeup that's happening initially as you start to move forward with plans. It's like you implement something, you do something, and then it turns out this is true. Okay, now let me shift and adapt to this new situation, and let's go forward again. So there's a bit of a sort of initial sort of adaptation you have to develop here throughout October, even though it feels like things are moving forward at last, which they are, absolutely. So Gemini, I hope that's a bit of help. As always, I wish you the very best for the month ahead, and until next time. For Cancer rising and or moon sign for October 2023. So Cancer, we are coming into eclipse season. That means we have a solar eclipse. The moon, your ruler, is eclipsing the sun almost totally. And 2 weeks later, we have a lunar eclipse. The sun, therefore, then eclipses the moon, your ruler. So there's definitely always a sense, Cancer, that you have of things shifting more, especially because your ruler is involved every time with an eclipse. And this time it's occurring in your third sign, the solar eclipse in your third and the lunar eclipse in your 10th. And what these two places have in common is very much about what you want to do and what you have to do also. Third sign is what you want. Fifth sign or 10th sign is the actions that you're taking, the direction your life is taking as well. So it might feel like there's some new direction that's cropping up now in October, a sort of a direction you might not have even considered. And so it's best to keep an open mind throughout. I would say there might be some new developments in terms of what's happening, what you're doing, what's happening at work, maybe more especially, or in your immediate environment. You might be dealing with something as something crops up. So definitely keep an open mind, but also use this time to make changes for sure, because that's what eclipses are all about. So other changes that are happening is that Venus is moving out of your sign after some weeks now and going back and forth through your sign, and your second sign, it's moving into your second sign again and moving past the point at which it began to move backwards in July. So there's many months actually of working things out here in relation to your home life, in personal issues and your ambitions as well. And always, because Venus rules your home life and ambitions, it's very much about Cancer is all about, the ambition to be happy, essentially, to be settled, to be, secure and safe. And now that Venus is moving into your second sign again, family issues are very much part of that, and finances and relationships and all of these things are combined. So there's definitely things moving on in those spheres of life. And so I think this is a more positive indication in October, despite, again, the more changes that are happening, which include Mars, which is your 10th lord. It's all about work. And any action you're taking is conjoining the south node in your fourth sign. So there's something happening at home. There's some big change happening at home. And in a way, whatever changes are happening in October in your home life and your work life, this is almost like coming to a head in October. Because for the last year and a half, you've had the nodes, the eclipse points moving through your home and work life, changing it up. So now that this change is sort of coming to a head and sort of reaching a resolution as well by the end of the month, just stay open to what the changes are. Mars in your fourth house conjoin Ketu in Libra, with Venus also moving signs into your second house, shows some changes in your home life and family dynamics and finances. There's definitely something you have to be open-minded about here, even though it's a great month in many other ways because of Mercury moving through your third sign where the eclipse is going to happen, exalted, very much powerful in terms of planning and strategy and scheduling and all of that. Again, it's just with the eclipses, you have to be really open-minded as to how all of this is going to pan out. So let me show you, first of all, the eclipse on the 14th. It's in your third sign. Mercury is conjoined the eclipse. It's a new beginning in many ways, but again, an uncertain beginning because it's eclipse. So you might not be seeing things clearly right now, so just be open to that. You might not be very clear about what to do, how to move forward. But again, by the end of the month, 2 weeks after this, with the lunar eclipse in your 10th whole sign, with Jupiter there co-present, that's a good time to just, again, find resolution, gain clarity around what it is you need to do at this point. Now, again, there's a lot of emphasis here on your 10th sign, but also now on your fourth sign, as Mercury, the Sun, Mars, the South Node, all in your fourth house oppose all of these planets, including your ruler, the Moon, North Node, Jupiter, Uranus in your 10th house. Everything, again, is coming to a head in a way. And it's essentially about finding a balance between your home life and your work life, or some changes that have been happening in either of those, or likely both. And finding that resolution again. And again, because it's an eclipse, it's probably best not to act on these things straight away and just see how everything settles down. As the dust settles, then you can be more clear about how to move forward and plan ahead. Because these changes are enough in and of themselves, but there are other things happening around these eclipses and longer term issues that are happening that are sort of creating sort of more uncertainty in your life in many ways, that really, if you were to try and resolve these more immediate issues, then you could actually just end up adding more uncertainty to an already uncertain situation. So in other words, try and just allow these eclipses to do their thing in October. By the end of October, find that resolution and how that can bring some clarity around how to move forward, and then move forward with these plans. I would say, and trying to find a balance between all of these things. Again, home life, work life, all of these things will be very much a part of the equation, I would say, Cancer. So, Cancer, it's a very complex month for sure, but also I think in many ways a positive month for you to move forward with all of these issues around home life, work life, all of these things, finances, family issues, all of these things can be resolved finally. So I hope that's been of help. As always, I wish you the very best for the month ahead. And until next time, for Leo rising and or moon sign for October 2023. Leo, your ruler, the sun, is about to be eclipsed. It is moving through your second whole sign, Virgo, for the first couple of weeks. And as it becomes eclipsed, then it moves into your third whole sign, into the sign Libra, and conjoins the south node, the southern eclipse point, by the end of October. So this is obviously a downturn in the year generally as the sun moves into its fall. And for you, Leo, personally, I think this is a need to withdraw and to slow down and to pay attention to your energy. And if you're feeling in any way under par, then just to not push through this. Because although the south node of the moon conjoined your ruler is about overcoming something, removing a block in many ways, it can also just make you feel a bit sort of under par, and just not to overreact to, I would say, that. Eclipses generally feel, though, that you need to react, that they have a sense of urgency about them, like you need to do something. But I would just ask yourself, really, do you have to do anything right now? Is it absolutely necessary? If it isn't, then, perhaps just leaving it for now until the sun moves out of its debilitation. It's literally its fall, where it's at its weakest in Libra, where you're having to, compromise more than you feel like you perhaps should or have to. Think about others when you would rather do something yourself. That's the complexity about the sun debilitated in the third sign, Libra, because the third is about selfish desires and wants, but it's the sign Libra. So you're having to give over those in order to please others. So the compromise is there, absolutely. But again, you might have to compromise and then sort of feel bad about it, that you're not thinking about yourself, or you cannot think about yourself. So until mid November, until the sun moves into then Scorpio, your fourth whole sign, where you feel a lot more energy return in that period, I think it's important to just maybe take a step back by the end of October, essentially. And especially between the two eclipses from the 14th of October until the 28th of October, until things finally resolve. And then when you have a lunar eclipse in the sign Aries, your ninth whole sign, the resolution that is possible there, I think, can lead to more hopeful situations. But if you try and push things through now, and especially in the middle of those two eclipses between the 14th and 28th, it's first of all unlikely to pan out as you imagine. And then second of all, you're just wasting a lot of energy in something that's not meant to be, or it's not meant to be that way. So there are other things going on, more positive things. One of those is that Venus is going to move back into your sign after being retrograde for some weeks now. It will do that from the beginning of the month, and Venus returning to your sign and moving past the point it began to move backwards in July means that at least you can move forward with things, and especially work-related things. So, Leo, if you've been having any sort of work issue, communications at work, or some issue around the work that you're doing not moving forward, or in a kind of holding pattern over the last few weeks, or just uncertain, this is a better situation with Venus now moving back into your sign. And by the end of the first week of October, it clears this shadow phase and it will move into a new territory now, and things can move forward. So I think that's good for your work overall. Again, just consider the after effects of that, and the sort of maybe flat feeling, and essentially is what is likely to occur after this whole period. So it's like you've got weeks and weeks of having to kind of think about things and go back over things, or maybe things aren't moving forward, and then you go forward, and then it's kind of like, oh, okay, that's all worked out now, but you know what I mean, so what? And there can be that kind of flat feeling from mid-October, especially then into the beginning of November, as then Venus also moves into Virgo. So everything can feel a bit flat by that stage. So just be mindful of that. Of course, that this is the time of year that we all feel a bit flat. It's the fall, after all. It's when the sun moves into its fall. It's when Venus usually moves into its fall, and everything sort of feels a bit, it's just not as great as it usually feels. So that's something to be mindful of. And maybe, Leo, this period from the beginning of October especially is a sort of last hurrah of the end of the, season, as you were. So it's like, it is obviously now autumn. We're really into the autumn season, but in another way, it's sort of like this last blowout, essentially, before the actual proper fall. So withdraw, I would say, in this period by the end of the month of October. Take in your energy more. Try not to expend as much energy. Try and think about, slowing down and paying attention without having to maybe push things through. So Mars is also moving in the first week. There's a lot happening in the first week of October. Mars is moving into your third sign, and that is better suited to that sign. And even though Venus, which is the ruler of this, is in your first sign, there's a lot like of really good stuff going on here in the more immediate time frame. Yes, there's the eclipses and all of that, but you've got Venus in your sign and Mars in the third. These are good placements. Then you have Mercury in your second, exalted with the sun. So definitely the first 2 weeks of October, I think there's a lot of strengths going on for you, Leo. Things are sort of working out, and you can work a lot out as well with Mercury, especially exalted in Virgo. So planning a lot, schedule a lot here, use the time. Use the Mars, I would say, conjoined Ketu in your third sign to clear a block. Now, this could be a block around your communication skills. It could be a block around family matters, and especially siblings. It could be a block around just you going for something and having the courage to do something and just go for it. And that's probably the best use of this Mars Ketu conjunction in your third sign. So the eclipse then comes on the 14th. So the sun, your ruler, is eclipsed, almost totally eclipsed by the moon. And this is always something to be really mindful of, Leo, because of course it means that the mind can eclipse reality. And the reality of what is eclipsed by this notion of what you think about it or how you feel about it, which may not be the case, which may not be real. The moon is your 12th lord, and so it's even more hidden. But when the moon itself, which is a hidden aspect, the subconscious, you might say, eclipses the reality of the sun in your second sign, this is very much around finances and family dynamics. And just to be open-minded about this, I would say, try not to get too fixated on what's going on now, because it's just all working itself out as the eclipses always do. They bring a sense of urgency, but I would really ask yourself whether this is actually really necessary. So try and think about things as opposed to do anything around any of this. Be open-minded about all of these things, and just stay open, and then you can make the decisions about these things afterwards, and the clarity can return. And of course, that's what eclipses are. They literally are, the light of the sun is blocked temporarily, and then you can have a deeper insight. But at the same time, there's a distortion of light. There's a blocking of the light and lack of clarity that can be there as well. So it's kind of like this concealing and revealing light, essentially, is what the themes of the eclipses are. So try, and especially around family issues, financial issues, all of these kinds of issues, I would say to be really open-minded and try not to be in any way definitive about anything at this point. Allow it to work itself out. A couple of weeks later, then we have the lunar eclipse. So in this case, now it's, instead of the sun, your ruler, being eclipsed, now it's the moon being eclipsed by your ruler, the sun. So this is where I think this resolution can come in, and especially because a full moon and lunar eclipse is in your ninth sign with Jupiter here as well. There's a great sense of optimism that comes out of this situation that might have initially begun in a very sort of uncertain way. Some development that you might not have planned for. And again, it could be a family issue, a financial issue, a sibling issue, whatever it is. But now there's something coming out and coming to your awareness, I would say, that brings more of a sense of hope. It could be in relation to family issue, again, like siblings and all that. It could be a father, it could be some sort of, even if it's just an outworn belief system that you realize, you see it for what it is, and you're like, oh, this is not actually the truth of this situation at all. I have had all of this wrong all along. And maybe it's a good time to maybe kind of clear that for once for all, and clear the air and get clear about this. It could be to do with home life, family life. Like I said, father, mother also could be involved in this, because all of these rulers are involved in this eclipse. So I would say by the end of October, Leo, really keep an open mind throughout, and try to keep, let me put it this way, try to keep your opinions to yourself initially, because your opinions might be a bit skewed, and eventually you can get clear about what the true situation is, and then you're able to make more definitive plans and decisions based on all of these things that have changed over the course of the month. So Leo, it's a complicated month for sure because of the eclipses. It always is for eclipses anyway, but this one is even more so in a way, because it's not just an eclipse sun, it's the sun moving into Libra then, and then it conjoins the south node Ketu, and it's kind of like the low point in a sense by the end of October. So there's no real sense of trust or, certainty around these things. And I think that's why I'm just advising you perhaps to just take your time with it. Things will work themselves out, and you can be more clear about it eventually. So, Leo, I hope that's been of help. As always, I wish you the very best for the month ahead. And until next time. For Virgo rising and or moon sign for October 2023. So Virgo, your ruler Mercury is about to move into your sign on the 1st of the month. And this means that you have a lot more strength to tap into, a lot more clarity, and in a sense, more rationality than anything else. And the clarity might be coming from that place of just, let's work this out. Let's figure all of this out. And with Mercury moving through your sign in its exaltation in Virgo, your 10th Lord, shows that there is definitely a sense of being more clear about your direction in life, and especially in terms of your professional life. And even though there are other uncertainties hanging around you, especially in terms of financial situations, which I'll talk about now when it comes to the eclipse in October, but at the same time, like I said, there's this sense of, okay, let's just be rational and cool-headed about this. Let's keep a level head. Let's do what I need to do. Let's plan what I need to plan and just get on with the details. And of course, even though Mercury is in your sign, it's opposite Neptune, especially as it initially moves in by the 2nd of October. It's important, therefore, to not lose sight of the bigger picture in a way, and not to lose sight of others as well while you're on this, while you're scheduling and ordering and managing everything, all of the details, that you keep an open mind about, other people, especially your partner, if you're partnered, or any other, essentially, to keep an eye on the bigger picture always, and, to be able to see the details while also, keeping that eye on that bigger theme. So even though the bigger themes are quite confusing right now, because all of the opposing planets on the other side of the zodiac, the Saturns, the Neptunes, the North Node, Jupiters, and all of these things going on, and especially in terms of what's going on out there, again, whether it's somebody else over there, whether it's a partner, whether it's some other or something out there in the world out there, showing lots of change and unavoidable change and uncertain change, there is this impetus now in October to make some real positive steps forward for yourself personally, the things that you can do. So think about those things, the things that you can schedule and get on with, even if there's a lot of uncertainty. Now, eclipses always bring uncertainty anyway. That's the nature of them, because it shows change, and any kind of change makes us feel uncertain and vulnerable. And the fact that these eclipses are occurring in your sign and also your 8th sign, and all the planets are lining up between your 2nd and 8th sign, it's very much about you and your financial situation and backing and family dynamics and all of these things. Could also pull in in-laws and all of that, your partner's finances, all of those things can get mixed up in this kind of eclipse dynamic. So keep an open mind, I would say, about all of this, because a lot of things are being worked out here, whether you consciously are on board with that or not. Everything is sort of shifting around. So first of all, before we get into any of the eclipses, let's just talk about Venus and Mars, because they're about to shift. So at the beginning of the month, we have Venus move into your 12th sign, and then we have Mars move into your 2nd sign. And by the 5th of the month, we have Mars conjoin Ketu in your 2nd sign, which is ruled by Venus in your 12th sign. So there's a lot of give and take that has to happen here. And again, it could be financially. You might have to spend something to secure something. You might have to sacrifice something to make something happen. There's a sense of clearing a block here, whether it's again financial or maybe it's, you know, a family issue dynamic that's going on. There's some sense of overcoming some issue now that's actually reached a head in many ways. So there could be something that's been building and building for the last year and a half, actually, with all the eclipses in your second and eighth sign. And because these two signs are very much about, again, finances and family and all of that, but they feel very sort of, you know, uncertain when eclipses happen here, because it's things that you really cannot do much about. It's like, you know, there's family dynamics that you cannot maybe change, or there's some relationship dynamic you cannot change, or it just feels more uncertain with these two houses, second and eighth house. So be really open-minded about it, and at the same time be very proactive about it, I would say, without being overly reactive about it, because that's certainly another potential with Mars and Ketu. So let me show you, first of all, the eclipse on the 14th. So it's in your sign. So obviously it's an important eclipse. Now, if this is your rising sign or moon sign, it's important. If it's your sun sign, it's also very important because it's the sun that's being eclipsed. And that is occurring on October 14th. It's at the very end of Virgo. Mercury is very powerful here. So that's one, again, positive about this eclipse and the upcoming lunar month. There's this sense of rationality despite the uncertainty and change with the eclipse. So again, I would say get on that, be very productive and plan and schedule and try and organize your life as much as possible. But again, because it's an eclipse, try and keep an open mind about whatever it is you're planning or whatever you're doing. That there's some sort of unforeseeable circumstance here around maybe your professional life or financial situation or family dynamics or whatever, you know, it might be, all of the above potentially. And yeah, do what you can while being open-minded, essentially. So that's the new moon and the new lunar month coming up from the 14th, and really it kind of builds into a crescendo in a way at the full moon and a lunar eclipse in your eighth host sign. That's on the 28th of October. And this is a lot more uncertain and probably a lot more reactions going on here. Full moons are more generally more immediately sort of impel us to make us do something, but more especially in Aries. And because all of the planets are lining up opposite each other, like Mars, the ruler of Aries, opposite the sun in Libra, Mercury, the south node, moon opposite Jupiter, Rahu, Uranus, again, second, eighth house. There's some tricky dynamics that are having to be worked out here, which are coming to a head in a sense. And again, although that's a positive thing, because ultimately you can overcome this and the changes that have to be made are made, and you surrender what you need to surrender here with Venus in your 12th sign. Whatever changes that are happening, whether it's professionally or personally, and these are absolutely a must. And although it might make the month of October feel very uncertain, it's absolutely necessary. So just keep an open mind throughout and use these more dynamic energies of Mercury, especially the beginning of the month, Venus in your 12th house, to let go of what you need to let go of while you continually plot a route and plan and schedule what you can plan and schedule. And again, just like I said, keep an open mind throughout as you're doing that. So I hope that's been of help, Virgo. And as always, I wish you the very best for the month ahead. And until next time. For Libra rising and or moon sign for October 2023. So Libra, your ruler Venus is about to move into Leo once again. It's been back and forth between Cancer and Leo, your 10th and 11th host signs, for the last many, many weeks, throughout the whole summer period, really. And now things are starting to finally move forward as Venus, after the first week of October, clears the point at which it began to move backwards in July. So as it does so in Leo, and then as the sun by mid-month moves into your sign Libra, there's an exchange going on between the sun and Venus, between your 11th lord and your lord. And so there's some negotiation that has to happen here, of course, but that potentially leads to a better situation. It's almost like you're putting Venus in your sign by the end of the month and putting the sun in your 11th sign in Leo. And that's a very powerful indication of finding that inspiration again and aspiration and reaching for your ambitions and dealing with other people and groups and thinking about, you know, what you want, that bigger picture, what you want, not just this sort of immediate time frame, what you want. And maybe negotiating the more immediate what I want with the bigger picture what I want, your bigger ambitions. All of this is more positive in a time really where there's a lot of things that are also very uncertain, including the eclipses more especially, of course, which I'll talk about now. But I just want to set the stage for that I think that this ultimately, even though there's a negotiation that needs to take place, there's definitely some more positive indications here. So this is as we start into the month, Venus already moving into your 11th sign. Yes, it's a tricky first week of the month for sure, because the Venus shifting signs, and then Mars also moving into your sign. That happens by the 3rd of the month. And by the 5th of the month, we have Mars conjoin the South Node in your sign. So all of that is quite complicated as well. But the best thing to do with this and how to think about it is that there's something here that you've been dealing with in the last year and a half that you might not have even spoken to another person. The South Node is very hidden. So there's some dynamic going on with you and in your relationships. And even if you never said a word, it's been going on. And now it's sort of like pushed into your awareness with Mars moving in. And it's unavoidable now at this stage. And in a way, you have to see that as a good thing, that it's good that you have to deal with it, that it is unavoidable, because you will deal with it and overcome the issue. And personally, this can be, a challenge, but again, it will be ultimately for your betterment. While all of this is happening, Mercury is moving through Virgo, exalted in your 12th house sign, with the sun in your 12th sign. And so it's a bit of a shaky start for sure in the beginning of the month until the sun moves into your sign by mid-month. Even despite Mercury's strength in Virgo, its exaltation, where things can, generally be more productive, and, scheduling is generally easier with Mercury in Virgo, except for you, Libra, because it's your 12th house sign. There's a lot to obviously relinquish here, that you have to, plan what you can and then let go of what you need to let go of, essentially. Let me show you the eclipse that starts off this whole process, which is on the 14th. So this eclipse in your 12th house sign, in the sign Virgo, the very end of Virgo, with Mercury, like I said, very powerful here in your 12th house sign, obviously is a new beginning in many ways, but because it's your 12th sign, there's also an ending that's happening here. And then again, because the South Node, which is ending its transit in your sign after a year and a half, and the sun will meet with the South Node a few days after this, there's a lot of sort of endings and new beginnings going on, essentially. And by the 18th of October, you can see here the sun conjoin Ketu in your sign. Mars is in your sign now. Mercury is about to move into your sign as well by the 19th. This is a lot of sort of, what do I need to end to begin again, and to see myself in a whole different way here, and to relate differently to other people. So obviously this means that there's going to be a lot of personal changes going on for you, as well as professional, and in every which way. And that's going to impact your relationship and how you relate to others in general, but also the changes that are happening for your other significant other, or whoever other. So it could be a business relationship as well as a romantic relationship, or any friends, anything at all, any relationship at all. You're going to be dealing with a lot of change in the month of October because of these eclipses. So as the sun moves through your sign, again, that exchange going on between the sun and Venus in the latter part of the month, again, that's kind of like almost a double negative. And I think it creates a better situation for you ultimately. And that, again, for you, Libra, is always about the compromise that is possible. And that when you do negotiate, things work themselves out. Just be mindful, of course, of Mars moving through your sign and now into combustion. It's fiery, it's heated. It's like being really mindful of your relationship, I would say, at this point, and to really think about that negotiation that has to happen. 2 weeks after that eclipse, there is the lunar eclipse, a full moon lunar eclipse in your 7th sign. So this is where everything sort of comes to a head in a way. And it's important at this point to be really, I guess, mindful and also respectful of the other and of yourself, and to find a balance between you and the other, whether it's a significant other, a relationship of any kind, or any kind of meeting with the other is important at this point. Not to be overly reactive to what might be happening around this time, October 28th. It's a full moon, it's an eclipse, it's intense, it's Aries. And to kind of just tune within and maybe just slow down and pay attention, and to listen to that guidance, that inner guidance that Jupiter is bringing you. So it's the interaction, of course, Libra, that always gives you that insight. You know, it's the engagement with other people that you understand yourself in relation to the other. But because of the eclipses being so intense, it just feels very urgent and like something has to be done. But again, I would just slow down and say, you know, to yourself, do I really need to do anything? Do I have to decide anything right now in this red hot minute? Maybe not. Maybe not. And so wait till after the eclipse, October 28th, I would say, and then make your decisions subsequently. It's a complex month, Libra. Definitely, it's the sort of culmination point of actually the last year and a half of many, many months of dealing with some things that you might not have even spoken to another. So really be mindful of all of these things coming to a head now, coming out into the open, and see that as a positive thing, I would say, to overcome these issues and to progress in your relationship and to evolve. So I hope that's been of help. As always, I wish you the very best for the month ahead. And until next time. For Scorpio rising and or moon sign for October 2023. So Scorpio, we're moving into a month that is very complex for you, and it's really worth taking some time to be mindful of these kinds of transits and these eclipses, more especially, that are triggering something in you, and to see them as absolutely necessary for your evolution, for the progress that you need to make at this point. And it may be complicated, but I think there are many things that you can get out of this. And again, I think I would always say this with Aries or Scorpio, Mars ruled signs, is that make sure that you're not working against your own best interests. And in fact, for Scorpio, that's probably more relevant, that you don't shoot yourself in the foot at this time, that you don't overreact, that you don't think about, yourself maybe just calmly dealing with the situations as they arise and respond to as they arise, as opposed to overly reacting and creating other situations that don't really need to be added to the mix here, because there's enough going on. If you can do that, this is a really powerful time for you to really clear some really deep blocks, Scorpio, because Mars, your ruler, is about to move into your 12th sign and conjoin your other ruler, Ketu, by the 5th of October. So before we even have the eclipse, which is in your 11th sign, I'll talk about that by October 14th, we have Mars conjunct Ketu in your 12th sign. And this is a bit of, like I said, a shoot yourself in the foot kind of transit. But in another way, it could be this kind of clearing a block, a really deep psychological, unconscious block. Think about that in terms of what's coming up from your subconscious. It may come out in all sorts of funny ways. It might come out in your sleep, in your dreams. You might dream of something. You might just get the sense of something. Mars in the 12th house, conjunct Ketu, is this sort of very reactionary kind of impulse, but you don't know what you're reacting to. You don't know why you're irritable or, reacting in some way. But in another way, it's important to check why you're reacting. What is it you're reacting to? Because there's an important lesson here for you to understand and overcome the issue, because the 12th house is very much about the blocks that you yourself, although unconsciously, are putting in. So it's like your own saboteur, as it were. So now that Mars and Ketu are here, what they both do really well when they come together is get rid of something. And the fact that the 12th house is also about getting rid of something, is ending something, this is a good time to overcome something in your life. Now, it could be because Mars rules your 6th house that you're overcoming some problem. It could be that you're overcoming an enemy, a competition, your own inner demons, a vice, an addiction, whatever it is, a bad habit, just whatever it is something that you can end here at this point and really get over it for once and for all. So that's the most positive aspect of this. The downside of that, of course, again, is, like I said, overdoing it and sort of working against your own best interests and creating problems where there aren't any, reacting strongly to a situation and then not being actually, clear about why you are, or that you even are, that you don't even recognize that you're reacting strongly to a situation, and then end something abruptly where it probably is best not to actually make a decision about it right now. Now, this, despite the fact that there are other stronger transits going on for sure, including Venus moving into your 10th house sign, moving past the point it began to retrograde back in July. So there's definitely professionally something moving forward for you now. And as the sun moves through your 11th house sign with an exalted Mercury, those first couple of weeks of October, I think, is a powerful time for your professional life and gains professionally. in every which way. Lots of powerful indications going on there. But again, if we tie that into the Mars transit, then it's important that you don't react strongly to something here, because there's so much good here that it would be such a shame to again shoot yourself in the foot and create a problem in these really powerful situations. So again, professionally more likely, but it could be any which way. It could also impact your personal relationships. And the other thing that's happening, of course, is that by the time the sun moves into your 12th sign, it's in debilitation. It's your 10th lord in debilitation, and it's fall. This is a downturn in a way professionally. And so you have to be mindful of the sort of need to pull back a bit, having reached your pinnacle in a way in the year, which is what happens generally around this year. And then going into the fall season, going into that sort of downturn, going into that with more awareness and the need to withdraw more will help you in the long run. That it's just, a period of just slowing down. It'll pick up again. Of course, the sun moves into your sign by mid-November, and so the energy comes back. So just give yourself that time, especially if you're feeling your energy and direction and professionally that is a bit sort of scattered, I would say, through the end of October into the beginning of November. But like I said, use the time the first week of October because of all of these strong transits, more especially Sun, exalted Mercury, Venus in your 10th, all of that. And use the time subsequently with the sun moving into your 12th, more especially because it's exchanged with, let me just show you this. It's exchanged with Venus in your 10th. So there is something to end potentially professionally. There's some, maybe that might mean just ending some way that you normally do things. You normally work this way, and maybe you have to end that, or you might actually have to end a job. But certainly even just ending a relationship professionally or ending a way of doing things in your professional life. And there's some give and take here. And obviously there's probably more that needs to be given than taken, essentially. So you have to let go of something. Maybe something you've been working on, you have to just finish it. Whatever it might be, there's some negotiation, there's some compromise, there's some ending here. But as all of that's happening, of course, let me just show you the eclipse, and that occurs on the 14th. This is obviously a time of new beginnings in a way as well. So again, use the beginning of October to sort of plan and have a strategy, and use this time as best you can to professionally promote yourself and all of that, and to network and all of these things. Afterwards, by the end of October, there's a lot you need to let go of, I would say. And maybe it was just your expectations. Maybe you had higher expectations than has played out. And so that might be all it is. Nothing might actually happen. You might not end anything literally on paper, but there's some sort of sense of release or ending or whatever it might be. So this is the new moon on the 14th. It's an eclipse. It's an almost total eclipse of the sun. The sun is your 10th lord. It's your direction professionally. It's not very clear right now after this period. So again, there's a definite shift between, the first part of the month and the latter part of the month. Use this new lunar month from the 14th and the eclipse energy to kind of shake things up and approach your work a whole different way. Like, be really open-minded about it, I would say. Yes, be productive and apply yourself and plan, but keep a real open mind about what you're planning and scheduling at this point. And again, because of the Mars, again, continuing to move through Libra, just be really mindful of reacting strongly to something and ending it prematurely, because you might regret it later on if you end something right now. I'm not saying that you shouldn't, because maybe there is something to end, especially a work routine or a health regime that is just not suitable anymore. But again, if you just end everything that you feel an impulse to end, you might regret something that you end. So that's just something to think about. 2 weeks after the eclipse on the 14th, we have the lunar eclipse on the 28th, where there's a resolution coming here. The sun has now moved into your 12th house, exchanging with Venus in your 10th, and Mars is in your 12th with Mercury. And then all these planets with the full moon opposite in your 6th. There's a lot of give and take. There's a lot of need to find a resolution here in terms of your work life and work-life balance, especially. And again, whatever professional achievement that you've reached, pinnacle, whatever you've reached, an ambition that you've achieved so far, there's something that you just have to finish now and let go of and move on and try and get a more balanced life, I would say, at this point, especially by the end of October, Scorpio. And absolutely, this is a time to find that balance. It's a resolution time. A full moon after a solar eclipse, the lunar eclipse 2 weeks later, brings that kind of resolve. It's again just be mindful of overreacting, I would say, with a full moon in your sixth sign Aries and Mars in your 12th sign, that you don't again shoot yourself in the foot, that you are very cognizant of how you might be reacting strongly to something that maybe doesn't really require that kind of reaction. It maybe feels urgent, but is it really? Is it that important? Um, if you were just to leave it for a while, would it maybe work its own way out? And quite possibly, yes, it probably would just all work its way out, and you'll figure it all out eventually. And I would say just use this time for the eclipse to kind of work these things out, or allow whatever can be worked out on its own before attacking it head on, is really what I'm saying. So Scorpio, it's a complex month for sure, but I think for you personally, things have reached ahead in terms of your work-life balance and your ability to kind of have some downtime and let go and just, relax into it all and not be pushing all the time. It's reached this head in a way after a couple of years of doing this. So in a way, allow this period to sort of work itself out and let that be the lesson moving forward, that a lot of things that you grapple with are worked out for you and you don't need to waste all of that energy. So as the saying goes, work smarter, not harder, is what I would say the month of October is teaching you, Scorpio. So I hope that's been of help. As always, I wish you the very best for the month ahead. And until next time. For Sagittarius rising and or moon sign for October 2023. So Sagittarius, your ruler Jupiter is retrograde now in your fifth host sign, and this is where we will have the full moon and lunar eclipse by the end of October, coming to some sort of resolution here around plans for your future and decisions that you are likely to feel forced to make in October in one way, and in another way, you probably could do it questioning whether that is actually the case or not. Oftentimes with the eclipses, we have this sense of urgency and that we must make a decision and like now, but that's not always necessarily the case. It's not necessarily true, at least. So think about that, I would say, in October, Sagittarius, in terms of making plans. The fifth house is very much about making a decision. Now, if you have children, of course, that implicates them and thinking about the decisions that you make around them and their lives, or thinking about any kind of future plans at all, I would say, or any kind of speculation, especially within the markets, or any kind of financial planning at all, because we're heading into a very complex economic period. I would say perhaps to hold off on major decisions, but at the same time, you have to respond to what is happening, what is arising. And of course, with eclipses, things do arise, things change. And you have to respond to how things are changing, of course. It's not like you shouldn't do anything at all, but as is the advice usually for eclipses, it's not the best time to force anything, to push anything through at this point. Respond to what's happening as it's arising, I would say. So let's start off the month, though, with some key changes that are happening really the first week of the month, but really throughout the month. The first things that happen is that Venus finally finishes up in your eighth host sign, Cancer, and moves back into Leo and will clear the point at which it began to move backwards back in July, finally in October. After the first week of October, Venus is moving on into new territory finally, after many months. So this can mean that, your plans can move forward as well, because especially with Venus related plans, your goals and ambitions in life, your social life especially, and work life. And these things can move forward now in a more, I think, optimistic, hopeful way, travel plans perhaps, or just any kind of plans. Because now it's moving into your ninth sign out of your eighth sign. Things feel a lot less uncertain, and you might be able to start making decisions based on these things now in a more, clear way, despite the eclipses, as again I said, that there are the eclipses creating these confusions as well in October, and yet still there's this sense of overall more clarity. Now, if you're in a Venus cycle, a dasha, as it said in Indian astrology, of Venus, all the better, because you're going to have this sense of clarity. And also, I would say Venus in the ninth house is good for enjoying some travel and cultural events. Now, Mercury, your 10th lord and 7th lord, is moving into your 10th house at the same time. So if I just show you how this is all panning out, there's some key strong transits going on for sure, beginning of October at least. That is because Mercury is exalted in your 10th house sign in Virgo, very down to earth, able to implement all these practical steps now that it's going to take to, do whatever you need to do. And whether that's in your job or just do whatever you need to do, generally, this is a good placement for Mercury. Mercury, it does well in the 10th house, exalted in the 10th house with the sun here as well, Mars finishing up here. Lots of, I think, better indications here, because once Mars moves out of your 10th house, because Mars is sometimes a bit of a irksome fellow, in your 10th house, your 12th lord, sometimes that can like put a spanner in the works. Now it's moving to your 11th house, leaving your 10th house with Mercury and the sun. There's better indications here professionally, I would say, for you, Sagittarius. Now, the complexity of that, of course, is that as soon as Mars moves into Libra, it is conjoined the south node Ketu and opposite your ruler Jupiter, and that opposition comes later on in October, of course, in a stronger way. But really, essentially, there's this push-pull going on in one way as well. So the push is the Mars, and Mars is always the push, really, especially when it's moving forward, but it's pulled back in a way by Jupiter retrograde in its sign, in the 5th sign. So you might feel this need or want to achieve some ambition, some goal in your life in general in Libra, even though there's also this kind of bringing up some block or potential block here with Ketu, and hopefully also removing that block and just achieving your goals and going for it. But then again, like I said, opposite, you have Jupiter retrograde in your 5th, and that is maybe the pull back maybe to something and to reconsider something and to really think something through. And especially, like I said, with the eclipse here by the end of the month, a lunar eclipse in your 5th sign with Jupiter here, your ruler, I would definitely sort of halt sort of making any rash decisions and just try to bide your time and think things through or allow things to work themselves out, I would say. But at the same time, like I said, Mars is gung-ho about moving forward now in your 11th sign. Conjunct Ketu is like, remove this block, get over this issue, like see it for what it is, bring it out into the open and achieve your ambitions. Essentially, that's what that is good for. So if I bring it towards the new moon and eclipse on the 14th in your 10th whole sign, obviously this is a new start, a new beginning, a special one for your career. And again, 10th house isn't just career, it's also about anything you're doing. It's the house of action. So anything you do now might feel more purposeful and deliberate, especially with Mercury very powerful here. And so this is a great time, I think, to make some deliberate choices, I would say. Again, just considering the eclipses, which are coming up very soon, which is this eclipse, but with the eclipse coming up very soon, 2 weeks after this, in your 5th whole sign, linking the 10th to your 5th whole sign, that is very much about the decisions you make based on the actions you take right now. So I would just say, again, yes, start again. Absolutely, it's a new moon. Yes, it's an eclipse and it's not very clear from the get-go, but start again, take action, and from that action, then you learn something about what needs to be done next. It's just by the end of the month, and I'll show you here for the full moon and lunar eclipse in your 5th sign with Rahu and Jupiter and Uranus all here, all retrograde also. It just probably would be a better time to sort of hold back on making any rash decisions about any of this, because it's a full moon in your 5th. And so it's an eclipse and it's not very clear. And because it's Aries, it might feel urgent that you need to do something or make a decision about something. But again, I would question whether you actually need to. And so that's the thing to think about by the end of October, October 28th. And yeah, there's a lot of strengths going on for you, Sagittarius, in October. It's just there's a lot of complexity as well with the eclipses. And at this eclipse, by the end of October, with all of the planets lining up between your 5th and 11th houses, it's all kind of come to a head in a way. It's all come to this kind of point now where it's about making these decisions, or realizing as well that a lot of these decisions are made for you in a way, that this is the only way forward, maybe, or this is how I must move forward. Again, in terms of your plans, the 5th and 11th are very much about planning your future and what you want to do. So I do think that after, a year and a half of the eclipses moving through these two signs of your chart, this is the last eclipse here. And so things are moving on and clarity can come back again, especially with Jupiter now, being left behind in your fifth house and eventually moving forward by the end of the year. I do think clarity is on the horizon. And I think these eclipses in October are going to bring that to you. And again, it just might not be very clear from the get-go, but eventually it all irons itself out and becomes clear. From confusion comes clarity. That's always the thing to remember. So, Sagittarius, I hope that's been of help. As always, I wish you the very best for the month ahead. And until next time. For Capricorn rising and or moon sign for October 2023. Capricorn, your ruler Saturn continues to retrograde throughout October and will actually slow down by the end of the month and station direct and then move forward again from the beginning of November. So definitely by the end of October, there's this sense of things kind of working themselves out, slowly turning around and slowly starting to move forward again. And this is especially in relation to family matters and finances and home life and earnings. These are all things that Saturn is implicating here by being in the second house. And although these things are sort of long-term projections and goals and, plans that you have to think about in the longer term, there are some key short-term changes that are happening, more especially because of the eclipses that are occurring in October, shaking everything up. And so with the month finishing with a lunar eclipse in your fourth sign, having begun on the 14th of October in your ninth, there's definitely some theme here around travel and home. There's a lot to do here, a lot of changes to keep an open mind about. To keep yourself adaptable throughout. If you are traveling, certainly be open-minded and leave plenty of time for scheduling all of these things. If you are making any changes in the home, allow those things to resolve themselves without maybe pushing things through prematurely, because that's certainly what can happen with the fourth house Aries eclipse. There could be some sort of impetus to move or change or do something and respond or overreact even to that, because there's a sense always with the eclipses of urgency. And I would always, for all the signs, I'm saying this, to really question whether or not that's actually true, whether it is really urgent for you to make that decision or do that thing. So again, just perhaps allow the eclipses to do their thing without overreacting and responding to what is happening. And as things change, respond to that change as opposed to making new changes that aren't really even necessary, I would say. So there's a lot changing right from the beginning of the month, though, right from the get-go. And that is Venus is about to move into your eighth sign. It's been for months now, back and forth between your seventh and eighth sign, finishing up in your seventh and moving into your eighth by the first of the month. And so by the first week or after the first week of October, it will clear the point at which it began to move backwards, retrograde back in July. So really, this has been going on for months and months. And so there's a lot of things that you've been having to renegotiate in terms of relationships, maybe more personal relationships, but also professional relationships, because Venus, of course, rules your 10th house as well as your fifth. So there's definitely something personal, professional, but just every which way you've probably been negotiating or having to renegotiate things and compromise. And I think that now that it's moving into your eighth house, it does show change, of course, but at least things are happening and things are moving forward. And, whether that's changes in your work, whether it's, changes in your plans around work or whatever plans you're making, I think this is more of a sense of things moving forward at last. The other thing to happen is that Mars then moves into your 10th house sign. So as Venus continues to move through your eighth, that does also kind of point to changes, and more especially because Mars conjoins the South Node Ketu in your 10th. So this has been building for a long time. Really could say that in the last year and a half with the eclipses in these signs, your home and work life have been really going through a lot of change. And in a way, it's kind of come to this point now. It's kind of reached ahead. And this point here is definitely reaching ahead up into the eclipse on the 14th of October. And then there's another sort of culmination, sort of extreme point by the 28th of October and the lunar eclipse as well. So again, the whole month of October feels sort of like a culmination point, like it's come to this now, all of these issues that have come up. And that's especially when Mars meets Ketu. and it sort of pushes everything out into the open, and you have to deal with it. And if you weren't dealing with it, of course, it means that it might abruptly come out into the open. So thinking about, any kind of home issues, friends issues, work issues, all of these issues might come to a head now. Any sort of planning around anything that you're, hoping for, thinking about these things in a sort of way that can allow for things to change without you getting too regimented about how that change needs to happen. Like eclipses always bring this sense of urgency, as if you have to do something about it straight away. But oftentimes with Mars, we can overdo it and then create problems where there don't need to be any problems. So allow these things to come out in your conscious awareness. In other words, allow that to be seen, be clear about that before you then make a decision or take action, especially on that. So that's what I would say about Mars Ketu. It is also a very good time to overcome issues in your work. If there are problems also with work and home. So if there are problems at home and that's, affecting your work or vice versa, this could be a good time to resolve all of these things, I would say, in October. The Sun and Mercury both move through Virgo the first couple of weeks. Mercury is very powerful here in your ninth house sign. This is a great time for maybe travel. Again, coming into the eclipse and especially the new moon solar eclipse on the 14th of October, I guess travel, despite Mercury's strength, could be something you have to be, mindful of and give yourself plenty of time around the eclipse period itself. But again, it's a strong time, more especially because of Mercury's strength in your ninth house. So this is the eclipse on the 14th. It's in your ninth, and Mercury here with the sun and moon, the end of Virgo. And I do think that this is a more positive time in many ways, a new lunar month starting here. But again, it's an eclipse. So you have to just factor in that and be open-minded about the changes that are happening that might not be very clear right now. And then as the sun and moon and Mercury all then meet with the southern eclipse degree Ketu here in Libra, in your 10th house sign, there's a lot of change happening in your work right now and into the end of the month more so. Or again, if you're not working, it's still affecting you. It's still anything you're doing, anything you're seen to be doing also publicly. So there's a lot of change here, and that's going to impact your home life as well, because that's what's opposite and where the eclipse comes 2 weeks later. So this is the eclipse by the end of the month. Here in your fourth house sign on the 28th of October, Jupiter is retrograde, Rahu eclipses the moon, Uranus is here, all opposite the sun, Ketu, Mars, Mercury. It's all, again, coming to a head here. And because for you, it's very sort of personal and public, very inner and outer, like the deepest part of you and the most external part of you, the fourth and the 10th houses are impacted. I would just say keep a balance here, keep the work-life balance, in other words. Keep an open mind about the things that are happening now. Try not to force changes through and overreact to things that are happening, and instead respond to things as they arise, as things change, as they are bound to. And all the while thinking about Saturn in your second house, rooting you in that sort of sense of what it is that's important to you. What do you value? And whatever finances that are changing right now, and that's how that's implicating, how that's affecting your work and your home life, and whatever decisions that you make in the long term, I guess keep the long term in view all the time, I would say, Capricorn. I mean, that's your nature anyway, but I definitely think there's a need for that in October more than ever, with all these changes that are very sort of urgent. And because the fourth and 10th house eclipses, all of that shows like a sense of urgency and things that are happening now and changes that are happening now, you could easily get lost in all the mix and forget why, what's important to you, what you value, and think about that. Think about who you are and what you value and whatever you decide to do eventually. So Capricorn, a complex month in many ways, but lots of strength as well. Lots of opportunity here and lots of change coming your way, as is the case for all signs, of course. But again, for you, it's very much about home, work life, and getting that balance right. I hope that's been of help. As always, I wish you the very best for the month ahead. And until next time. For Aquarius rising and or moon sign for October 2023. So Aquarius, Saturn, your ruler, is continuing to move retrograde for the whole of October. It will actually slow down by the end of the month, and then by the beginning of November, station to go direct. So this is sort of slow, one last month of slowly recapping, reviewing, and reassessing all of these major themes around endings, new beginnings, because of your 12th lord in your first sign. There's very much a sense of things having ended recently, perhaps, or things ending currently and new things beginning. And so perhaps there's a whole review over these things. And I think, when we make big changes in our life or big changes happen, and especially around Saturn related themes, which are very slow to happen in a way, but then happen, there's a need to kind of reassess those as they happen, instead of just keep moving forward and forget about them and just move forward and keep moving forward. Saturn retrograde every year, but more especially this year, as it's doing it in your sign, is asking you to really be with that and understand that what's the implication here, and what does this mean long term for me, and how I am in the world, who am I, and how do I engage with the world, and what do I do, and how do I engage with people around me, and how do I relate to other people. There's a lot of questions that Saturn retrograde in your sign is going to bring up, obviously, in the next couple of years, but this is more especially kind of prominent as Saturn slows to station at the end of its retrograde phase in your sign in October. So that's Saturn in the background. That's the kind of like the background hum going on, with a lot of other changes that are going on in the more immediate time frame with all the other faster moving planets and the eclipses. So the other thing is, of course, is that your other ruler is Rahu, the northern eclipse, and the month ends with a lunar eclipse by Rahu in your third sign. So this is really kind of finishing out this whole cycle, a year and a half of Rahu in your third and Ketu, the south node, in your ninth, and really changing the way you communicate and what you're communicating and how you're expressing yourself, and what you think about these things, and what you think about yourself as well. And how do you put yourself forward? How do you express yourself, like I said, more clearly? How do you communicate effectively? But also, what is it you're expressing? What is it you're expressing? Who are you? Because when you link Rahu in your third with Saturn in your first, it's very much about questioning who you are and how do you express who you are, essentially. So it's in a way coming to a head here, and it's the changes that are coming to a head here then change you and how you express yourself, and then you move on and make changes elsewhere, as Rahu is actually going to finish up in your third house, and Ketu finishing up in your ninth house, moving into your second and eighth house into November. So that brings more changes in terms of what is important to you and your value systems and your finances even, and family, and all of that will bring changes in that kind of more, you might say, more rooted part of you. And, being clear about what you want first is important, because then when you subsequently go through changes in your family life or your financial life, you need to be clear about what you want in the first place to be able to go through those kinds of changes subsequently. So let's talk about the eclipses, but first let's talk about Venus and Mars, which are about to shift signs before the eclipse on October 14th. Mars has been moving through your eighth sign. It's going to move into your ninth. Venus is finishing up in your sixth sign and moving into your seventh. This is more positive overall in both respects. Venus moving from your sixth to seventh, Mars from your eighth to ninth. So let me just show you that first. So here you have Venus in your seventh, a much better transit than the sixth. It's been hanging out in the sixth for the last few weeks, and that is not the best place for Venus, to be quite honest. But now I can say that to you because it's over. Into October, it's in a better position. It's better for your relationships. It's better for feeling happiness, just generally content and happy with your lot and happy with other people and engaging with other people in a nicer way. And as that happens, Mars moves into Venus's sign, Libra, and that's your ninth sign. And so there's definitely something more meaningful cropping up here, not just enjoyable, but meaningful. The thing is that Mars is conjoined Ketu. And again, this is the end of a cycle anyway of the eclipses in your ninth sign. So it's kind of like really changing what you fundamentally believe to be true. And Mars is likely conjunct Ketu to push this into your awareness now around this eclipse, coming up to the eclipse on October 14th. So it could be that there's something you just learn about yourself, or you discover that you have this insight, you just become conscious of something, aware of something, of how, something is happening. Or it could be professional for sure, because it's Mars, it's your third and 10th lord. So there could be something, that a superior lets you know about, like your boss or superior in some way. They let you know something you didn't know before, for example. Or it just could be that you learn about something about yourself in relation to your professional life, whatever it is, or the way you communicate in your professional sphere, Mars conjunct Ketu in your ninth is going to bring that out. So that's a good thing because you want to know, because if you know, then you can deal with it and you can get rid of that thing if you need to get rid of it, that behavior, that way of communicating if it's not clear, and get clear, essentially. So that's all positive. And the fact that Venus is in your seventh sign while this happens is more positive also, so that you can just get along with people better once you remove that problem, if there is a problem. Sun and Mercury go through your eighth house for the first couple of weeks of October. That's also a very strong position for Mercury. It's exalted. And so, although that also shows change, and your plans might be changing around other things that are changing, including the eclipses, which will happen here. Let me show you that eclipse actually, which is on the 14th. So this eclipse on the 14th is showing obviously changes, because eclipses show change anyway. The eighth house is the house of change. Eclipse in your eighth house, even more change. That might feel very uncertain, and you might say all change is uncertain. But eclipse changes are more uncertain because it kind of comes out of the blue. You weren't aware of it potentially, and all of a sudden you are. And now it's like, oh, I have to react to this change now. And all the same, because Mercury is here, exalted, I think it's a good time to keep a cool head and make plans around these changes and adapt and sort of think on your feet, as they say, and move with the changes. And I think this is therefore a more positive thing ultimately. So that's the new moon and eclipse on the 14th of October. And then 2 weeks later, there is an eclipse in your third sign, conjunct your Lord Rahu, aspected by Saturn. Jupiter is here, Uranus is here, all in the third Aries, with Mars opposite now. The sun also opposite, and Mercury all opposite. So everything has sort of come to a head here. And again, like I said, I think this is a real pivot point in terms of these themes around third and ninth, which is about how you communicate what you believe to be true, and what guides you, or who guides you in your belief systems, and what is truth anyway. So a lot about how you think, how you process information, and how you deliver that information and communicate that effectively to other people. Because these are eclipses, though, probably best not to be very definitive in anything you're communicating right now, especially if it's written. Like if you're sending off an email around the 28th of October, I would be really hesitant in sending off that snappy email or making that snap decision. I would be more cognizant of the changes that are happening underfoot and allow those changes to pan out first and react to those as they happen, as opposed to reacting strongly, overreacting potentially, and then making issue with a problem that doesn't really need to occur. And so if you're just allowing allow these changes to occur first and reacting to them as they arise, you're probably going to be better off in the long run, I would say. So take a step back, I would say, by the end of October, more especially as things resolve themselves. And, it'll all come out clear in the end. So that's October, Aquarius. It's a very complicated month for sure, but there's definitely a lot of strength and potential and more ease in a way. And that's actually because of dealing with some issues and overcoming something for yourself personally that you can then move forward with. And by November, you will absolutely be able to move forward, because Saturn is going to move forward and everything starts to shift in November in a bigger way for you personally, even though the eclipses are over. And so in a way, October is a sort of setting the stage for that change that happens in November for you. Hope that's been of help, Aquarius. As always, I wish you the very best for the month ahead. And until next time. For Pisces rising and or moon sign for October 2023, Pisces, your ruler Jupiter is retrograde in your second whole sign. This is where we will have the lunar eclipse by the end of October. And sort of everything is coming to a head here. It's all sort of coming to this point now of resolution also. But it might feel like in October that things are sort of being shaken up in a big way. And it's always best, I think, advice to reconsider things and question whether something is really, truly urgent enough to make a decision and act on with an eclipse. It always feels more urgent during eclipses. And we have two in October. We have an October 14th solar eclipse in your seventh house. That's going to impact your relationships, of course. We have then the resolution 2 weeks later on October 28th with that lunar eclipse, a partial lunar in your second house. So relationships, family matters, all of these things are intertwined, of course. But again, consider whether or not it's really as urgent as it feels, because it might feel very urgent, but it might not be. It might not be necessary to make any decisions around these things right now. Now, again, whether that's a relationship or a family issue or a financial issue, also, that's another implication here, as the 2nd and 8th house are going to be emphasized in a big way in your chart. And so 2nd and 8th house, especially when they're combined with eclipses, it might feel like there are a lot of changes happening that are uncertain. And, all eclipses are uncertain in a way because it shows change. But change in the 2nd and 8th houses are those kinds of things, especially around finances and family and all of those things and relationships. It feels more uncertain in a way because there are things that are really important to us and make us feel safe. And if we feel in any way, unsafe, it kind of can rock us to our core. So what I would say is use October as a month that is in a way resolving a lot of these things, but it might not be very clear from the get-go. It's kind of reached this point now where it's all coming to a head in October and things will be resolved, but you just have to be a bit more patient with this as they are, and then make your decisions as you go from here. Allow the dust to settle and things will come clear. So before any of that, though, before the eclipses, we have some key changes. Venus is about to move out of Cancer finally into Leo, and beyond the point it moved backwards in July. And so it moves into Leo the 1st of the month. And so Mars then as well on the 2nd into the 3rd moves into your 8th. So 6th and 8th house transits are also in a way not very clear. They're kind of like your blind spots. Imagine if you're driving straight ahead and 7th house is right in front of you. The two blind spots either side are the 6th and 8th. So this is where Venus and Mars, to be really mindful of where you might get caught up with that, and especially combined with the eclipses where there could be some reactions going on in relationships in particular. So be really mindful of reacting strongly to a relationship situation. And again, question whether or not it's as important as it feels to do something. Because again, with eclipses, it always feels urgent, but it might not be the case. I would say more especially react as, or respond probably is a better word, respond to what's happening as it's happening, as opposed to reacting strongly and making something a problem where it doesn't need to be a problem. Venus in the 6th can be a problem because it's like, I'm just not happy, or I don't feel appreciated, or I need to experience more appreciation and love from you. But then recognizing that maybe I'm not giving as much appreciation and love to you, that's a 6th house Venus transit. The other side of that is just enjoying the process of bettering yourself, and in that striving for becoming better, that you can just enjoy it, that you are getting better, but not to be, criticizing along the way, whether it's self-criticism or criticizing another or feeling criticized by another. It's as within, so without, right? That's Venus in the 6th. Mars in the 8th conjunct Ketu, more especially, is this kind of overcoming this obstacle in yourself, in your life. And it could be just an obstacle in being able to see a way forward, being able to make some changes that are absolutely necessary to overcome some issue. And Mars conjunct Ketu can certainly be a help there to be able to remove the problem. Now, whether it's a problem in how you're communicating or what you believe to be true, or, this kind of faulty belief that could be, do with, maybe getting rid of, whatever it is, there's some issue to get over here. And I think this is what this month is good for, more especially than anything. And again, it could be playing out more immediately, more obviously in your relationships, but it's highlighting some changes that are going on within you. So the Sun and Mercury are in your relationship space. Mercury is exalted here. That's a very powerful position for Mercury. And it's a very busy space in a way as well in October. But it's important to use this for what it's good for, which is being very rational. And Mercury exalted in Virgo, down to earth Virgo, is about, picking apart things for sure. But again, not getting too critical, but just maybe think of it as being more rational and cool-headed, like keep a level head here and work these things out with other people as best you can as you're working these things out in, in your own life. Working things out in terms of many different ways, of course, in your daily routines and any kind of blocks that are coming up, in any kind of blocks to your communication with other people, especially, that's a big one. But any kind of problems that are coming up, there's definitely a sense of overcoming some blocks here with the eclipse. So here's the eclipse. It's on the 14th and it's in your 7th sign. So let me just bring it into your sign so you can see the 7th sign is activated. Mercury, like I said, is very powerful. So again, level-headed, cool as a cucumber. Let's talk this through kind of thing. It's a new moon, but it's a total solar eclipse practically. It's an annular, which is almost like a total. And basically, there's a big change happening here in your relationship, therefore, on the 14th of October on. And this has already been triggered, of course, when Mars has already moved over this point. And now that's in your 8th house with the South Node, there's some challenge that you're overcoming with your relationship, and any kind of intimacy issue, any kind of, financial issue, any kind of issues with the in-laws, all of these things could be stirred up right now. And they need to be, because if you don't know what they are, and if you're not clear about it, you're not going to be able to overcome it. And this suggests that you will be clear about it eventually and overcome it because of that. 2 weeks later, then we have a full moon in your 2nd sign in Aries, Mars' sign, with Mars opposite in Libra and the sun now in Libra. So there's a lot of things to, again, in your relationship. The relationship is the one thing, but this is the next stage on, like, the 2nd and 8th house, which is in a way, again, the culmination point after a year and a half of the eclipses here, reaching ahead here in terms of these issues. Again, it could be financial issues. It could be issues of value, of self-worth. And how do you come together with any other, whether it's a partner, business, romantic, or any other, and how do you negotiate things, and how do you find a balance between your mine, yours, or mine, ours? And there's a lot to work out here because there's so many planets jostling here either side. And a full moon is always that anyway, but with so many planets and an eclipse in Aries, which feels very intense and feels like you have to do something or say something, I would just really hold back on all of it and just, again, question whether or not you really need to say that thing or do that thing, and maybe just wait for the dust to settle before you actually do anything. And so after the 20th of October, the sense of things sort of settling can come back in, and you can start to move forward and make your decisions based on what has transpired. And there's probably going to be a lot of changes in October, even in terms of just the global financial situation, whatever about your own personal finances. But again, beyond finances, it's more about value and worth and what's important to you. What do you stand for? And so a lot of changes around these themes. So think about them and, hold off maybe on making any major decisions until after these eclipses have passed. So Jupiter, of course, this whole time is there. It's implicated with the eclipse. And normally with Jupiter, we seek Jupiter for guidance and how to move forward. But Jupiter itself is with the eclipse and it's retrograde in your 2nd sign. And so in a way that the answers are within. There's no clear answer without, in terms of there's no clear answer necessarily coming from somebody who could normally give you good advice. So instead, perhaps maybe just use this time to go within, and especially again around the 28th of October and eclipse, to go within, to find the answer within, to find that nudge. What do I need to do next? Where's the next step? Jupiter is more likely to give you that by quieting down the mind and being still. And so that's why people always say, astrologers always advise to be very still, have a quiet day on the eclipse day. So again, thinking about the 28th of October, I would say even more so. For yourself personally, thinking about the 14th of October eclipse in your 7th sign in terms of your relationships, as well as more personally. So hope that's been of help, Pisces. As always, I wish you the very best for the month ahead, and until next time.